Thanks for staying with us on SABC News. Let's take a look at your market news now. Asian stocks ended higher on a new round of US fiscal stimulus hopes. China's positive economic growth for the third quarter also boosted sentiment. Japan's Nikkei climbing 0.3%. In Hong Kong, the Hang Seng Index advanced 0.7%, while China's Shanghai Composite Index ended a tad lower. Shares on Wall Street ended higher on Tuesday on growing optimism that talks among US lawmakers are progressing with respect to a US stimulus package aimed at cushioning the economic shock from the coronavirus pandemic. House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi said she was optimistic that Democrats could reach a deal with the White House that could get aid out by early next month. So the Dow Jones Industrial Average closing up 0.4%. The S&P 500 ended 0.47% higher, and the Nasdaq Composite closing 0.33% higher. Let's take a look at the rest of the markets. Let's get some more on the markets. I'm joined by Chantal Marx from FNB Wealth and Investment. Thanks so much for your time, Chantal. Nancy Pelosi saying she's optimistic about reaching a COVID stimulus deal with the White House. And as we've just heard, global markets seem to be rising on the back of that sentiment.
Yes, it's been quite interesting because it seems as if she's quite optimistic, but the Republican side of the fence are not that optimistic. So things are a little bit confusing there, but we really need some clarity going into the US election around this matter, because otherwise we're probably going to continue to see volatility in markets.
Mm-hmm. And over in Asia, that optimism is also being felt. I know you've spoken about the volatility, but there's a sense that there is a buoyancy.
Yes, absolutely. But unfortunately, that didn't really carry through to the European market. And you can even see when you look at the JSE today that it's quite topsy-turvy, and the stocks that are very much exposed to the rest of the world or to developed markets are really underperforming. So it's definitely a tentative boost to Asian shares as well as to US shares overnight. I see that there's still a lot of uncertainty and lack of clarity as to how this whole story will play out.
Yeah, let's stay in Asia for a little bit, Chantal. BBC reporting that China's economy continues its recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, seeing growth of 4.9% between July and September. That's compared to the same quarter last year. Why and how is this happening for some of us who desperately need that kind of growth?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually incredible to see how quickly this economy has rebounded. I mean, at the beginning of the outbreak, everyone was talking about V-shaped and U-shaped and W-shaped recoveries, and it seems as if only China has been able to actually get close to any sort of V-shaped recovery. And I think there are two main reasons for it. So the first being that this country was growing very quickly, even prior to it entering into its COVID-19 lockdown phase, which means even though there were disruptions, the momentum was still behind that economy, and the structures were in place that were quite positive from a growth perspective. And then the second thing is, I think they were extremely decisive in how they dealt with their COVID-19 outbreak and really nipped it in the bud. I mean, they even closed down entire cities, and they were very, very strict. So for that reason, you didn't see the sort of out of control situation that escalated into or that materialized in the US, and you certainly haven't seen the magnitude of second wave outbreaks as you have in Europe.
Mm-hmm. Let's go now to some company news. AstraZeneca is set to resume trials after they were stopped. That's according to Reuters, an exclusive report from them. What did that do to the company share price?
So I've been looking at the share price all morning since we spoke about this specific story, and it's done absolutely nothing. The share price is down. It's down in line with the rest of the pharmaceuticals, and I think that in this case, the market does not want to buy the rumor, they want to buy the news. So before we get a strict or a specific, let's call it a report from the company saying that, yes, they have restarted trials, and this was what the specific adverse effect was, or the reason was for why the trials were suspended in the first place, you could see continued pressure on the share price, or at least it moving in line with the rest of the global pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah. Let's come to South Africa now, where there's still chatter over that fine imposed by the JSE on Steinhoff over that very euphemistic term, accounting irregularities, 13.5 million rand. Was that enough? And have we heard anything from Steinhoff over that fine?
So it probably isn't enough, but it's the most that the JSE can do within the current regulatory framework. I think that there probably is room for improvement there, because if you get the large-scale kind of fraud or accounting misrepresentations, that, if you want to call it that came out of Steinhoff, you should be able to penalize the company accordingly. But they have absolute sums that they can penalize companies at, and this is what that 13.5 million rand expresses. In terms of Steinhoff's response, very short and sweet. They put out a SENS announcements shortly after the public censure, and they said, we're just happy it's over. So I think it's another tick off the new management team at Steinhoff's list in terms of trying to sort out the mess that was left for them by the previous management team.
Mm-hmm. Staying with people who've had quite spectacular falls or quite large difficulties, Blue Label Telecoms presenting results for SABC yesterday. What happened?
Well, I mean, the result was bad because SABC has not been making any money. It's been going through a large-scale restructuring. It's heavily indebted, so profitability is under a lot of pressure. But they're trying to clean up the business. So they've actually right-sized their subscriber base. So they've reduced their subscribers, or the subscribers are down by close to 30% or by a third. And the idea is that they want to pivot to kind of higher paying or higher margin subscribers so that they can get their financial affairs in order. To me, this still feels very high risk. And I think that the fact that they continue to post these huge losses will make its attractiveness as a possible investment company or a company to invest in quite low, and for that reason I'm also quite nervous about what Blue Label is going to do with SABC going forward.
Mm-hmm. Chantal Marx from FNB Wealth and Investment, thanks so much for your time and analysis on Point this afternoon.